This is Maai Perspective discussion series, where women talk Budo. Hello and welcome to Maai Perspective Women Talk Budo Season 2. You're here with us today in the house of Ismail Hasan Sensei, who is Fran and my teacher. And this is a special episode today because we have just had our Christmas seminar with a very special guest teacher as well, Yanti Amos Sensei, who is a Shotokan Karate instructor. Thank you for joining us. How are you both doing?
Thank you very much for having us.
Great.
Yeah.
Good. We've had a good weekend, haven't we?
Yes. The last day of a 3-day seminar, trying a completely new martial art from my side. So very excited.
Yeah. Okay, so let's reflect on the weekend that we just had so far.
Yes, it was a lot of information.
Absolutely.
Very, very interesting. But as our visitor and special guest, Yanti, we wanted to ask you what did you observe, first of all, when you were in the mat doing Aikido, and also from outside? Which things did you find in common with Karate?
Yeah.
Which things were surprising for you?
What I really loved about, I took part and participated, but at the same time, for some classes, stepped back and I watched from a so-called third-person or third-party perspective. And what I observed first and foremost was the fact that you are so adept at the collaborative partnership work, which we don't in Shotokan really have a lot of, except when we're doing what we call the bunkai, which is the applications of all of our techniques. And that is something that in the Shotokan context and then in the Shotokan world, we actually have to work really hard as instructors to get our students to get into the mindset of application, so actual tactile contact with your partner. And this was just something I really enjoyed watching, because you guys are so, not only are you tactile and you are used to holding on to one another's wrists and then doing all kinds of crazy but wonderful moves.
Rubbing until the end.
And I got that experience firsthand, and I was lucky enough to have some great instructors. Obviously, you both had the opportunity to teach an hour each, and that was wonderful to watch, but also got the experience with Ismail Sensei, and I think it was Ivan as well, and also Urge Senseis, and each one of you has a different way of explaining things, but I felt that it was a nice format because, as we said, we had a chat earlier on over coffee, but the feeling was you have it land on you because you hear it from so many different quarters. And I love the fact that we had that blend of languaging and narrative and directions from each one of you. And then it fell or landed more clearly because you had that blend. So I'm shifting a little from the fact that, obviously the partnership work is very, very compelling, and really what stood out for me, being from the Shotokan world background, but also this ability in a seminar context to feel the languaging and the different charismatic styles from each one of you was fantastic. I loved it. So yeah, please.
Out of curiosity, does that collaborative attitude when training, does that develop later in Shotokan Karate? Or?
Yeah, it's really up to the instructor oftentimes, and I have these discussions with Ismail and Michelle, and the thing is that as an instructor, you are bringing so much of your unique voice to the mat or to the dojo, and it's really up to you to set the ethos of what the tone is in terms of setting that collaborative tone. So you can have that collaboration, which I know happens with you because of the nature of what Aikido work requires. But you can also have an undertone of some degree of aggression, or people bring their issues to the mat, and I'm sure that it sometimes gets expressed through that partnership work. And it's no different actually in Shotokan because we do drill work, as you saw today. We go up and down the dojo, and we sometimes go forward and back, and we have more of an exchange. But it's not the hands-on stuff that you happens, we roll and obviously we fall on the floor and we get up again. And there's a lot of very, you have to be okay with that contact. And with Shotokan, you can be a little bit removed. You can stick out your arm and like this, and you can move forward and back, but you can actually be a little bit detached. Whereas with Aikido, it requires that sort of personal. You're invading into that person, or not invading, but just encroaching and sticking. We talked about that concept of sticking today, and how we don't necessarily have that, but you have the idea of sticking, holding, and then letting go, and knowing when to do that. So that was very interesting.
But there is a kind of stickiness in karate. I noticed today. One of the things that stood out for me in your class was you kind of emphasised this kind of connection, yeah. And what I realised was how infrequently I really look into my partner's eyes when I'm training in Aikido. And then I was doing that today, and it's suddenly like. I don't know how to describe it really, but it's we don't you know, in karate you might not have this kind of contact, but there's this kind of contact, and that's quite something actually. I found that quite
absolutely. It's a skill that you have to develop for communication, because we don't have that tactile quality or the depth of that tactile quality that you guys do have. And so what Richard, my husband, and I really push in our classes is that you do have to establish a connection. If we have a partner in front of us, as you had today, we rotate, so we're going to the next person who may or may not have that connection. Maybe you're always looking down, or they just you're completely disengaged or not locked in. And so it's good practice for us to be changing partners constantly and to be challenged by the issues that another partner might bring to the table. But when you are in contact with that partner, we encourage people to lift the chin, because oftentimes people are just, this is their default, looking down crazily. But they look down. And instead, we're asking them to make that eye contact, and through their eyes, make a kind of communication. Yeah, I'm coming with this technique. I'm coming. And then you have this exchange and a kind of simpatico relationship that you're developing, which encourages in turn, it encourages a flow and a stickiness and a bond, if you like. Just for the moments that you are with that person on the mat or on the floor, you want to have, I don't think it's a great analogy, but it's like having a dance partner. So you want that. If my core moves, then that person has to in turn move back. And if I move back, then you should move forward. And then there's in the same way that dance partners, talking, my older sister is a salsa teacher. And so, or it's a hobby of hers. So she's always talking about this connection, and maybe you have a connection through the core, but you will maybe also have that connection through the legs, if it's tango or it's something else, that's a little bit more body. Yeah.
It also reminds me of music when you're playing in an ensemble.
Totally.
There's also that kind of
everyone looks.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And Sensei, did you want to comment at all on perhaps your observations as well? Because obviously Yanti Sensei taught today, and you see us every day. And what kind of? I'm curious to know your observations and your thoughts.
The main thing for this particular seminar is I was just thinking as you were talking earlier, 6 people were teaching, and that's the first. Ivan Sensei, Enrich Sensei, yourself, and friends starting new. Of course, Yanti's as a guest, and so I'm sort of a lot less involved than I've probably ever been in all these years of teaching. And so I'm sort of adjusting a little bit as well. It has to be done on the one hand, and regarding yourselves, it's all new. Effectively, it's all new, and different presentations. I promoted Urge this weekend, and not only was it apt. Like a lot of the gradings I often give, they're overdue. Because I sort of expect a lot, I suppose, and I demand a lot. But having someone I won't say completely different because I think ultimately it's not. What you bring into it through karate, that was a very conscious choice on my part, and I've done the tiniest amount, but I enjoy what I see when I look it up on YouTube. I play around in this kitchen usually with it, but I put my eggs in one basket, and that was Aikido, but I think when you pursue something with enough seriousness, with enough depth, you form very good structures and observational skills and body knowledge. And once you start acquiring that, you look at somebody else coming from their area and their field, and you realize that's the part where it's not so different. The body being the body, but the way it's implemented and possibly the ethos is a little different. You gave the tiniest, the smidgenest hint of something, which is fantastic. Karate people have got it. Most of the striking arts have got it. Aikido used to have it, and it's lost it. And it's the unpredictability, and there's this freeing up and not knowing what's going to come, and especially when you're with someone who's got a few tools in their armory. You've got to be on your toes. I try to encourage that in my own kind of way, virtue of partly my nature and partly from the background that I came from. So I can relate a lot to that side of what you do. As an individual, I get that and I like that. And how far one would pursue that, well, of course, we would need to see more of what you've got to offer, but I like what I see, and I like the way it affected the students. I think, if not all of them, nearly all of them, I think they enjoyed this. I think it's new, and in fact, it was new for me, because maybe I'm used to moving, but suddenly like, nope. It's like having to I'm not telling them no, I'm telling myself no. This is not this dance, that. No, this is when you're open, this is when you square up. And it's great because it breaks all the usual stuff and it freshens things up a bit. And the body likes it. The body enjoys that. I've always found that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful observation, because when I found out we had white belts in the cupboard, I put on a white belt when the rest of you, when you're a hakama on Friday and Saturday, and I felt that Zen beginner's mindset, which is so humbling and so good for
It's good for you.
It's good. It's really good for your humility and just being open to and absorbing whatever new material is in front of you, and that's how I felt on Friday as well as Saturday. And then it was so cute because today you guys were wearing white belts, and then, except for you, obviously, but then you were wearing your white belts, and it was so adorable because.
Were you expecting us to do that?
No, I didn't. I thought you were just going to wear your.
Well, we actually.
Not my input.
But it was.
We hadn't really discussed it, but somehow everyone just turned up and was like, "Oh, we're all doing the same."
It was also surprising for us because, for example, I had never seen Enrich, who was promoted to Godan, without a hakama or without a black belt.
And suddenly we're all like on the same on a level.
It's a great level up, and it's that democratization of everything being at the starting point of something new and a new experience, a new just a new body of knowledge that was being imparted, and I loved it because everyone was just approaching it with a fresh mind, blank canvas, and just a openness that you don't necessarily get a lot of. This is why your club is so unique, because in I don't know about the Aikido world, but in the karate world, people are very rank oriented. They're very hierarchical, and everybody's looking for the next opportunity to grade and to up level so there's a consciousness around, or awareness, shall we say, around what rank you are. And so that person's son, or was that why would she line up next to my left? Oh, she should have lined up there, or that sort of thing. Yes. When you do line up, I explained it briefly today. We bow in, for example.
I was thinking you would have noticed. One of the newest teachers, still relatively new teacher, and the senior teachers are being picked up for taking ukemi for you, which is
It's not traditional at
It's
all.
not traditional, and that's a breach of etiquette, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, you're saying that I chose the wrong people?
No. In dojo culture, dojo structures, regardless of the martial art, let's say the person teaching is junior to some of the people in the in participating. If one or two of those participating are senior to that student, and that student calls them up for their partner, that's usually a no-no in many dojos, but not in my dojo.
No, and so that was fine, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Completely.
Okay, because when I chose little
Joyce.
Yeah, when I chose little Joyce, there was a reason I chose it, because I wanted the smallest person in the dojo to prove the point that it is about biomechanics. And it was a shito, or it might have been a punch, and it was a punch. And I wanted her to really push through and send energy from the back leg right through to the first two knuckles. And as we all saw, that was really it sold the idea that you don't have to beat the 6'1", or you don't have to beat belt strongly. It's about biomechanics. And I hope that she helped to prove the point. And as she was the most junior, she was the most junior, but I hope it helped to bring that point back home.
She in that context, she was probably the smallest, but she also has like a big warrior spirit as well. So it's really good.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
It's pretty fiery.
Yes, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
So normally when I choose the uke, I choose because I know that someone is going to help explain the point to the degree we need it to explain.
But what I meant by that is not really that, though that is important. It's just that your reference to titles and positions and how touchy people can get, and it really doesn't matter, as long as it's done respectfully. So,
absolutely.
So if it's not a second dan pulling out a fourth dan or a fifth dan now I don't mean from your perspective, because you're the senior karate person here by far. I'm talking about amongst ourselves as Aikido people, and you probably witnessed that with certain dojos you visit where people are quite touchy. You can't, you got to line up this way. You can't call up that person. You can't do that. I personally feel it narrows it, and it loses. I suppose I would call it a natural quality to it. And I mean that's my own background, and with the writing that's going on, it's like recollecting that. I'm the new one. I should be here, and all the progressive seniors in San Diego in those days, and it wasn't. It was refreshing. Next moment, someone who's a second dan is calling up a third dan to Tego Kemi. No one batted an eyelid. They just got on with it, and it was there was some liberation out of that. They never forgot who was who. They know who the seniors are. They didn't alter that, but I found it refreshing. I think it was something quite pioneering about that, and I think the other stuff stiffens things. It stiffens the atmosphere, and people are stiff enough as it is without adding these extra layers. But and then you've got to use your common sense. Someone crosses the line a little bit, and each dojo and each teacher has to decide what that line is. And but back to my previous comment, that yes, that little smidgen of unpredictability, I like that. I think you guys have got oodles of that as it progresses, and Aikido tends, not us, I would say, but there is a predisposition towards choreography, and it's a preset. It's like a very unnatural agreement. Is like, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, you do that. Oh, that's not fair. You're going to fall, you're going to roll. So that makes me look very good because they flew away very nicely, and I'm very happy with my move. I'm very happy that they rolled and didn't get plastered, type of thing. And it loses, it's the edge. Yeah, ultimately, that's the one word I would use. It loses its edge.
Exactly. I guess, when I think I used Milo, what's his name?
Miroslav.
Miro. When I asked him to do a fake or sort of like a setup for Ju Kumite, which is the free form of exchange of hands, which incorporates by definition the unpredictability of not knowing what technique is coming. Although I told him, you're coming to step in and snap it back, and I will block and counter. I was hoping to get that kind of vibe or that ethos in that particular drill because I wanted to incorporate the unpredictability, even though I was it was very contrived because we were just keeping to Jodan, and we were just keeping to the Jodan punch to the chin or to the neck or just top of the sternum area. And I hope you got the sense of that, and that you guys also felt that. I mean, that's a really, really interesting point, and one I think I'm going to evolve and develop in terms of how to teach that, because it just came as I was flowing and I was watching you and seeing, okay, what do you need and how should I describe it? And, you know, I was sort of riffing a little in the moment, because I do very structured classes, and then I know what I'm going to teach. But at the end of the day, if I see something happening in real time, I adapt, and I just, you know, the class sequence out the window. It's like, what am I feeling? What's in front of me? And then I decided to go into that direction, which is the uncertainty aspect.
Yeah. We wanted to ask, a little bit about that, because where maybe if you can tell us, like, what was your initial plan and how did it change? Because watching Aikidokas probably was like, there's this concept, there's this other concept, this applies, this doesn't. How do you prepare?
No, it was really, that's a great question. Because what happened was I had something in my head, and you might know that I'm just coming to the end of a 3-week teaching tour with my husband Richard. Richard went back to New York, and I'm spending this extra week here. But we had done Scotland together, and then Amsterdam. We did. He did a teaching gig one night in Norfolk, and then I came to London. But as you can imagine, when you're in that kind of mindset and you're constantly teaching and you've got ideas for your classes, sometimes, well, certainly in the case of us in Scotland, we did. Like today, we did 3 hours back to back, and then we switched the group. So I started off with the coloured belts, and then I switched to the duns, and you know, it was Shodan and above. So between Shodan and probably Rokudan. And so there's a bit of a mind shift there, but I have to say I like to prepare. Richard likes to riff, and he just sees whatever is in front of him, but then he's like Ismail Sensei, I'm sure. You've done so much throughout your life and that's the only thing you do, then you know what you're going to teach, because you see the bodies and you see they're not moving the correct way. So, okay, I'm going to do this class. And maybe in your head you may disagree with me, but Richard has these kind of templates that he doesn't have to refer to anything, obviously. It's all here and it's all here. I'm the type of person who likes to lay out a sequence in my head, and so I write it out on my moleskin, because I'm really addicted to notebooks. And so I'm going to do this and map it out. And I do the same for my yoga classes, to be honest, because I know who I'm going to teach. And so I'm going to teach the doctors on Wednesday night. So I'll have the class sequence for both yoga and for karate, and I will have a beginning, middle, and end, but I'll have layers. Layers of drills or techniques that slowly grow more complicated. So it's deliberately designed to build up to something which I call the peak pose, or the peak moment, or the signature drill, where maybe it's lifted from a kata or something complicated, but I'll only get to there if I've layered ahead of time. And then we do the actual kata, let's say. So we didn't have time today to do. I really wanted to do it, but we didn't have time. But
we didn't do kata, but I could feel the layered approach. So now that you mention it, it's like, oh, yes.
Does it usually work?
Yeah, without fail. I mean, I just came back from an anatomy training with a really great yoga instructor. His name is Matt Giordano, and we did we call it chromatic yoga, and it is at the end of the day, it is exactly that. It's all about sequencing, but you're looking anatomically from what parts of the body you're actually stretching or working in order to layer and prepare the body. So the body is ready for that so-called peak pose at the maybe 3/4 through the class. And you have, so therefore you're not only warm and you're ready for it, you've stretched the muscles you're going to emphasize, or whether it's upper body. And I mentioned hip flexion, but I also mentioned lateral flexion. So we're working the body in a way that we need to do and affect the technique in the correct way.
Wow.
And so that is anatomy. So I try not to blind you with science, but I wanted to throw in a little bit to give you inspiration to be connected more to your body and have agency of your body. So in other words, at a certain point, let's say if I were training with you every week, or let's say hypothetically I'm not Aikido, but let's say I was an Aikidoka, then I would be slowly but surely layering in those anatomical cues so that you guys have the agency over your body, so that one day, let's say, God forbid, let's say you're super badly injured, you can then go to a doctor, you can go to a chiropractor, osteopath, whoever, but you can describe what's going on with your, I have a problem with my external rotation of my left shoulder joints, and then, or you want to be able to describe exactly what's wrong so that any medical expert will know what is the issue, and then you'll be able to say, well, I don't agree with that, or I don't agree with your diagnosis, and I'll go to a second opinion, or whatever, but at least you had that knowledge in your body. And so that was really the point of the anatomy training that I just did, and so I wanted to throw that tiny bit in, and so ultimately you become more responsible for the sensorial experiences. You know exactly which muscles you're using. You don't have to know the Latin names of those muscles, but at least you know what you can do at home to strengthen. And also to just maintain. I was just talking to Ismail Sensei about how at our age, it's about maintenance, but it's also about self-care. So we want to admit, do we really want to roll like 15 times on that? Yes, do we really want to do that at our age, or should we leave it to the 20-year-olds or the 30-year-olds? Because we want to manage our energy. And I think that we have our biggest joy is obviously just seeing everybody else flourish and find your voices as well. So that's a really fun thing about what we do, I think, at our age and level.
How did you feel, Sensei, having a friend and a very experienced martial artist watching your students teach? Did you feel vulnerable, or I don't know, like feeling that you were...
I was busy watching you. So no, I wasn't thinking about that. But I was aware that we were going to do this, so I was curious. Well, now I'm hearing it now. But no, I just keep attention on my own students all the time. I may not look like it. I go on a phone sometimes. I shouldn't say that. But I'm always paying attention. It's rare to switch off.
And of course, you joined in for the first part of Yanti Sensei's classes today, and then for the rest of it, you were watching. And of course, you're watching your students, but practicing something very, very different. What was your...
I see the same thing. Yeah, I can see the same problems they're having in the karate drills as they are in the Aikido drills. It's just the body management and how people process. And there's a lot of smoke coming out of ears. and you did a brilliant job in that, because obviously there's a level of technical sort of aptitude that's needed, and if you're not used to it, I mean, you just started doing a little bit of the Aikido, which is similar in a way, but Aikido is technically very, it looks like that, but within that is all the details you did in your karate today and the Aikido yesterday is there, arguably more, because when you've got the contact, both persons, it's not that the other person is this lump that you practice on and do your thing on. They've got to be as cultivated in their training as the person doing it on them. It's, as you're discovering more and more and more, and what the goal is. There is no goal, I was sort of coming into this thing that I mentioned to you yesterday. A little sidetrack here. Of course, you have competition, and you've got this fella or gal, and you're going to bam, and whatever. And we don't have competition, of course, which is the biggest load of nonsense anyone has ever said.
We don't have formal competition.
No, we don't have formal competition, and we don't have competition in terms of or approximating it within our practice, and yet it's there. Now that can be used constructively. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Young, like you said, maturity. You're enjoying a different stage of your as a teacher, as a practitioner. But you're watching young people. I mean, younger than yourselves. The Jameses, the Yanas, the Ennises, hopefully Joyce and others. You see them. There's plenty of competition there, but there's also smoke coming out of their ears as they're trying to put this stuff together, and especially the old saying, a little bit of knowledge becomes a dangerous thing, and you get used to working in a particular way, and that needs to be broken. I mean, that's part of what I try to do. You're always trying to break it down to a degree, because you are primarily, above all, interested in the now. And now is killed almost immediately when you get into the assumption. Then it's this. Yes, of course, the body drops, the knee bends here or the knee bends there. These are the basic structures of it. But the way that's used is the bit where now you have to abandon it, not your form, but your the way you use that form. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this well, but you're saying free. You've got to free it up. So because if you don't free it up, then you're trapped within form. And there's this very specific sort of paradox in a way. You've got to trap yourself into the form to get it, and yet you've got to free yourself from the form in order to be free to move and respond to a situation. And not many focus that way, and I do, and I try to keep that alive. And part of bringing Yanti over is also to see how you guys deal with that from a different perspective, and. I think you did well. I think you did very well, actually. I think I'm so naughty here. Miroslav, he's the one with the karate background, and I think when you called him up, I think he forgot almost everything.
I'm guessing they got a bit nervous.
I think you put him on the spot. Yeah. But that's okay. That's part of the game. You know, if you don't get nervous, if you don't freeze, you're not.
That's okay.
It was quite. It's quite because we're used to going up and taking ukemi from Sensei, and then when you call us up, it's just suddenly a different.
To add to that, just having a word with Ivan a little earlier. It's interesting. You don't fall.
We don't do any more than fall.
So there's something about you use the terms beginning, middle, and end, which of course all structured training has. And our third bit usually ends up with somebody down there. That's the completion. Call it the energy you draw from the ground, because that's a lot of what it's got to do with. The falling and getting up is not just you collaborating and cooperating. It goes far, far beyond that. You're drawing energy from the ground. Your stance achieves it in one way. Yoga, which I know you're a teacher in as well, and I did quite a bit in the past. You draw power from the ground. You draw power, but also when you fall, you're drawing your own internal energy to get up. Because my goodness, I'm sure you've had your moments where you don't feel like you want to get up. You've got to get up. When is class going over? I don't think I can do any more of this. And you have to do that little bit more. And that's the bit, that's the space that you go into, where we use words like chi or kokyu, power. That's where it comes from, and that's where the notions of center and gravity evolve out of that. But yours, you develop it in a very specific and a very different kind of way, and yet you're also very mindful of gravity. You cannot hide that in the stance, especially the lower. Your insistence on going lower and deeper.
So for us, it's about trying to stay grounded and stable and rooted with the stance that we have. And sometimes when you lift a leg, as you saw, we did the kicks, and so your support foot is going to be very key. So you want to have that stickability or that connection to the ground and trust that foot and know, you come to know the different parts of the foot and where you can stress the energy points, whether it's the big toe, whether it's the instep, a little on the outside.
That was so interesting.
The pivot points. And so there's a whole realm of talk around that as well.
It's a lesson in anatomy, isn't it?
Yeah, so exactly. We touched on a little bit today about the pivots and where we do the ball and versus the heel. But we are all about staying up, and therefore it's about the foot and where you put your energy on the foot, and prepare it. Let's say if you're doing a kick, and I guided you to do a bit of a pivot in order to lift the
as you did today with me.
Yeah, exactly. When we did the roundhouse kick, the Maai kick. And so I wanted to make that point, that it is not about the fall, which I, by the way, love the metaphor, because, falling down and then always getting up. That idea is just a lovely metaphor for what we do generally in our life's journey. But and that is, it's a lesson. I mean, I know it sounds very trite, or it can sound a bit cliche, but absolutely. I mean, when I watched you guys, you were exhausted, and I could hear you breathing, and you're going, oh, and grunting, as you're taking a kemi, and then you had to get up, and then
some more than others.
What's coming next, and it was some effort.
The point you made earlier about the eyes is interesting, because the more tactile arts like judo and ours, you could say ours is somewhere in between that. But I remember the late Tamura Sensei saying, if you see it, it's usually too late for the tactile stuff. And I remember a very famous judoka, he was, I think, a silver or bronze medalist, Brian Jacks. I grew up with the name. He was a very famous household individual, very powerful man, but he himself came from the sort of the latter part of classical judo. Olympic judo has changed so much from that era, but he was saying himself, you've got to feel it. You've got to feel it. So the eyes, you need the eyes, but you got to feel it. You got to feel it. But I think you guys feel it as well. There may be a detachment, but you still got to feel it. You got to feel the movement in space, and how to read that, and how to anticipate that, and not get it wrong. But it's different. The eyes, I think, probably become more paramount.
I mean, that's the portal. That's like the beginning point.
Yeah.
And then you get something else beyond that. But it is at least the initial connection point.
And we have the Ido, where you're on your own.
Yeah.
And then how do you not drift into la la land, and when you're exhausted, had your sessions been the Ido after 2 days, you go, and it happens. At the best of them, it happens. It's you go into sort of automaton mode, but you're still doing it. So maybe it may not be fresh, may not be quite as alive as usual, but on some level you're still doing it. You get tired, you bounce back, and then you pick it up from there. But to keep that going when there's no one in front of you, and I love your 5 strikes: the bag, the makiwara, the air, and the body, and your favourite, the body. Poor Joyce.
Oh no, yeah, Joyce didn't know what to expect. I'm sorry for not explaining it well enough. I hope she wasn't freaked out.
No,
but
she far. I mean,
she probably was excited.
I think her heart is going in a good way.
Yeah.
What were we talking about before? Was it maybe with Kathy, or it might have been with you, Fran? But we were talking about how you handled the paradigm shift, because that's a real testament to your ability to just, as you said, roll with the punches, and you have to put aside your ego, because if you don't, then you'll inhibit your ability to take in the information. And what I loved, and coming back to the white belt, you guys putting you on the white belts on, and it was really, I'd say it was adorable, but actually it showed a great, it was a symbol of modesty and humbleness, and overall humility, and so it was clear to me you came to the table with a real open-mindedness, and so to different degrees. Obviously, you guys did super well, and then you see people slowly taking on more of the principles, and then in their mind you can see their eyes change, because you see they're looking for similarities, they're looking for differences, they're looking for, okay, this is a completely different framework, but I'm liking it. And so there was this kind of joy, because I said, I don't want an end result, and I'm not expecting you to come away with a certain outcome, but I want you to see if you can enjoy it just for what it is.
An interesting discovery. Okay, watching the last class, watching you guys, realised how many of my students like to hit.
It's interesting.
It's because you don't quite get that sometimes. It's like you see a fist. There's the face, there's the body, and it goes there. The fist is poorly formed, and of course we do our strikes a little bit differently, but it's still poorly formed. And then suddenly the abstract is gone. It's like there's a chin, there's a chest, there's a neck for the Shinto. Wonderful.
Something else I observed, because I was also divided, I had this sort of continuum in my mind, like relying on Aikido as a reference to understand what you were explaining, or just saying that I don't know everything. I don't know anything. I'll just try to absorb as much as I can. I was like moving in between those two.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned like when you finish the drill, stay there for a few seconds, wait until the yame to keep that tension until the very end, and that felt very similar to weapons work in Aikido, and also the keeping your eyesight like open to your surroundings. That was also very similar, and I hadn't realized. Well, that happens to me in Aikido, and it happened to me today. The lack of proprioception, that's another concept you brought in. Like, it's not just knowing where whether your knee is aligned with your foot, but also everything else. That's super interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, some of those concepts are just universal. So if you're movement based or you're training in any kind of movement, it doesn't have to be a martial art, but anything, you just become aware what your default is. And are you hunched like this? Is this because we're all at our laptops during the day, or are you working on a proper posture? And I mean, I you know how I said sternum lifted, shoulders back? It's because I'm working on it too. My tendency is to be a little bit hunched like this. And I walk like that as well, so I'm trying more and more as I age to not be the old lady walking forward with a rucksack or a handbag, really hunched forward and
because this bit wants to close.
It does want to hunch and it does want to close. So it's a conscious effort, but I do a lot of it in karate class and in yoga because I know that that's what everybody struggles with. So it's a big opener for your lungs and for your breath work. So it makes perfect sense and it's very obvious. But do we do it? No, not always.
That's just an observation about teaching or a comment about teaching because I teach as well, but I've also taught other things. I've taught music as well, and it's interesting what you said about. You told that to us because that's what you're working on, and I find that quite a lot myself. That that actually teaching is quite a good tool for real self-study as well, and I think also just to slightly unusual analogy, I knew a guy that was a maths teacher, and he was a teacher, and he said that he was really good at teaching maths because he was never good at maths when he was a kid, so he knew exactly where challenges. He knew exactly where the problems were and what they would find difficult to understand, and he knew exactly how to explain it so that they would understand it because he had to go through that process himself.
Well, that's
you said that probably 40 minutes earlier. Exactly that.
Yeah, because the thing is that people with a lot of talent don't necessarily have to work at it, and they don't even understand why they're talented or how they're talented. But those that really struggle and have issues, I don't know, I'm thinking directly about an experience I had as a kid, because I really loved tennis, but I wasn't very good at it. And my dad was a really great player, and he expected me to be as good as him growing up. And here am I at school, and I'm thinking, well, how am I going to get better? And then knowing that I had struggled with certain things, a terrible serve and a terrible backhand, and I knew I had to just practice it. And I just repeated. And then as a young adult, the same thing. But then I saw all these other people at the club who were very talented. They didn't even know how to explain it to me. I asked them, how is it that you have such a great double-handed backhand? And they just said, well, you just do this and there you go. Yeah. And I'm thinking, not very helpful. So I worked at it, read a lot of books. In those days we didn't have YouTube, and I looked at tennis magazines, and I thought, okay, if I had to teach someone, how would I like to be taught with the technical aspects as well as the mindset aspects? And so today as a teacher, I always think about, okay, this is a confidence issue more than it is technical, and maybe it's both. So I always offer the mindset attitude, okay, increase your confidence these ways and practice these things to lift up or remove the self-doubt, and then work on the technical stuff, or do it in tandem, depending on the personality, like in a private setting or with a private student, or in a group class. And so I always look at that as an advantage. I say it's my unfair advantage because I know what it is to struggle. So and then to your point, Kathy, I really think it's not a bad thing to have struggled to try and learn maths, for example, because I was terrible at maths as well. So, I actually enormous empathy, enormous sympathy, and I just know what it is to struggle. And therefore, I try to break it down, and that I've always thought in order to understand something, you have to dismantle it. So you break it down into its constituent parts, and then you say, okay, this is how you'd learn if you had no clue whatsoever. And I just set it up for the worst, like the so-called lowest common denominator. And that way, you can take it from in a group class like today. Stevie Sensei was joking, you just had to take it down to the lowest common denominator. And I said, well, I started off that way. But then I thought, no, these are super intelligent people. I'm not going to humor them with just the pat answers.
Thank you.
No, so I then lifted it to that higher level. But in certain things, you go backwards to that elements of the so-called fundamentals and the basics. But you just use your judgment over time, and then you throw in something really basic, but then you take it up to, because that's why we moved pretty quickly onto 3. And I felt like you were all ready for that. And I wanted you to have the experience of the 3 moving around each other.
That was very enjoyable.
I saw you
getting all pumped up.
We had a really nice exchange.
Yeah. And I think he enjoyed it as well. It was great.
Yes. Yanti, we wanted to ask you, among the many things you observed, on the one hand, some of them were technical and very Aikido basically, but also there is a group of young people that is growing and growing, and there are people in many different stages in their training. And something I feel is that the sense of community at Aikido of London is becoming stronger, and that is helping people maintain their commitment and have this sense of belonging. You're committed to yourself in your training, but also you have your friends who are growing with you. And our question is, were you able to observe a little bit of that? What else did you observe? And also as a teacher, how do you nurture that sense of community? There's a bit of context as well.
Yeah, because so Yanti Sensei, you travel to teach a lot, don't you? Usually in karate dojos, but so you have this experience of experiencing many different dojos and the kind of the feel and the atmosphere you get from each place that you step into. So we were curious to hear.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it is about relationships. So as I said earlier, it's modeled very well by Ismail Sensei because he is a relationship builder. And I've always believed myself that it is about relationships behind the scenes. It's not always at the camps that the bonds are built. It's actually behind the scenes during the year in the lowest, let's say the coldest months of the year in Scotland, and then, in Iceland, and we go to Norway, we go to Scandinavia a lot, Sweden as well. And we have relationships with fantastic dojos all around Norway. So we're visiting them very frequently. And, the relationship building happens on DMs, on texts, on emails. It's not just in-person experiences, but the depth and the breadth of our connections is when things go wrong with their families, or someone's ill, or someone's struggling, or, all kinds of the ups and downs of so-called journey of life, and we share that sort of stuff. Someone's, let's say, struggling in Scotland, and so I'm normally the person who's got the patience for that sort of email or the text, and so Richard is a little the figure that obviously the technical head of our group. But I really enjoy the relationship building, and so that's a natural for me. And I also like to problem solve. So I'll give some advice, and I'll say, have you tried this breath technique? Or just tell me, talk about it, and I don't have to say anything. All I do is listen. Sometimes it's that. And it runs the whole spectrum of types of issues that people want to share. Sometimes karate related, sometimes not. And therefore, I would say that it's obviously the training times that you spend on the mat and in the dojo together, but it's a lot of it is just quiet to so-called low times, meaning I get a text or I get a WhatsApp and I get an email, and I'll respond to that and I'll say, reach out whenever you need to. And I'm here if you want to call, or do you want to Zoom, or do you want to, whatever, share whatever's going on. So that's that's what I mean by relationship building, because it's not always the great times when you're all having a wonderful time in the restaurant or at the bar or whatever. No, it's a time when you are thinking, okay, I need to go back into the dojo, I need to train, or whatever it happens to be. So it's,
And about, and maybe you have also your views on this, Sensei, about balancing that openness to listen with your authority and the rigor.
It's a great question.
Any thoughts on that?
I think it's organic. I don't think there's like some structured sort of leadership program you go to and you learn these things. It's things appear and you sort of deal with it in that way. And the way it often appears is you say a message, a WhatsApp, a bar, the mat. Sometimes your teaching is technical, it's a class, and you can see someone struggling. This is their off day, and then and sometimes you're tough on them. But why are you tough on them? Well, come on, you've come this far, and behind that is someone who's trying to lift you. Okay, but then another time is you're audibly more compassionate or empathetic. At least is like, you hear me say, I say to you often, it's like, you okay? And this is maybe your body more than anything. And then you're becoming aware that it's not just the body, that a person's circumstances, situation changes. And sometimes you communicate outside. I try to be fair, and I think people know. I don't know why, and I don't know how. I mean, Stevie, who's over there, I think we were in Corinna, and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but you've got to bottle that up, put it in a bottle, because don't have to put it in a bottle. It's already, it's already there. So I don't know, I think it was your husband who said he remembered something I said about you never know what it's like to be on the other side. I don't know me. Let's say like just using training, I will never know what it's like to be thrown by me. Just like you, and it's like, well, it sounds like a stupid, silly teenage comment because it's so obvious. But when you think of the repercussions of that, it becomes a little bit more serious. And suddenly it's like you can feel where people are, and what are they picking up on you? Are they picking up on someone who's abusive, someone who's trying to help you, or something that's so clean? And you've heard me use this term. So this is the mat part, something that's so clean that it can only come through effort and polished work. That if there's something other than clean, that there could be machinations going on there. Someone with an agenda of some sort. That needn't be bad either. But I think there's that. There's back to your authenticity again, a genuine desire to see people do well. And you mentioned community at one point, and I suppose it relates to that, this whole thing. The community side is interesting. Is this a social club? I mean, that's a question one could ask. It's not, is it? It is a dojo. It's people work fairly hard, sometimes very hard. and the long-term objective is progression. People will flatline. Sometimes they regress. Sometimes they pick it up again. Sometimes they continue in various ways. And there's a consistency. You're always there. You're still giving them input. And I think in that respect, off the mat, I tend to be rather. I don't know. I think I am helpful with people, but on a personal level, I'm also rather private, as you probably realise. And so it pivots a lot around the dojo, and then I try. I've been very sociable lately, and I've been going out for coffees with some of my
That's so great.
and but they all they find is what they already knew. So it's funny. It's just the application has changed. We're sitting like call me Ismail. My name is Ismail. Yes, Sensei. So off it goes. And I think little things like that. But I can't be as specific as Yanti in that way. But we all have our modes of operation.
I think you're absolutely right that it is organic, and you respond to the moment, and you're intuitive, and you say, "Oh, that person looks like they're really down today. What's up?" Or you'll see someone in the dojo context, and you'll see. They're not themselves. Okay, I'm going to reach out to them, and even if I don't get a chance to speak to them in person today training, I'll send them a little note, or I'll send them a text and say, "Is everything okay?" Or just talk like a real person.
I've been doing that lately as well. Good luck with blah blah blah. Good luck. It's little things here and there, but. I think it all adds to it. I mean, it pivots around the training. That's why, and of course, it has a broader sort of consequences. Some people. I mean, one of the things I admire about yourself is that you juggle this thing, that your life as a whole, and the specific thing of training, and we can get carried away, and it can get very intense if you think of the dojo as a microcosm of life. It is, whether we use those words or not, and the reason why is it's you, isn't it? The woman sitting here looking at me right now is the same woman who went to the class who's going to go to the office tomorrow. It's like that doesn't change, and unless you go into a proper full-time professional training, that becomes the center of your life, and then the way you see everything else expands out of that. Well, we don't have that, so it's a more natural arrangement. People have got the bulk of their time, which is not their training. No matter how much we think about it and how much we love it, most of the time you're not training, and you've got the other aspects of your life, but we sort of transmute in a way. We come to the dojo, we do our little bows, we go in, and we become this thing that is not of the world, but it's of the microcosm. It's still of the world. It has to be apart from it, because if it isn't, then what's the point? But it can't be so removed from it that is like, you've heard of the terminology, weekend warriors. Suddenly they're like
faking your persona.
This huff and puff, and they're up themselves. Do you conduct yourself like that at work, with your wife or your husband or your partner or your kids? Or you don't. And suddenly for a couple of hours a week, you've created this artificial thing, and hopefully, I mean, maybe that's what you're alluding to, that we bend our knees and we bow, and we can get very cultural about the Japanese-ness of that. But whether you bow knees or not, humility is humility. I mean, whichever form or shape you take that, and humility usually comes in a form of, I don't know it. I don't know all of this, and I will never know all of this before I pass, and that's probably true of most of our lives. Most things we do. Humility is important because it's back to what do they call it? Somebody from a seminar, not doubting Thomas's. When you feel you're fake, imposter syndrome. But on some level, we all have imposter syndrome. Now, whether it overwhelms you, if it overwhelms you shouldn't be teaching. Because there's sufficient ego there to bring something into the game, and there should be. You need ego. Now, there's checks and balances, of course, and that's where humility comes in, where why you're doing this and what is the purpose of it. Is it self-aggrandizement, for example? But it's not. So I think we're quite genuine. I think the bulk of the dojo is quite genuine in what they do. And if that's partly to do with me, then I'll take that.
Absolutely. So one thing that I noticed, because you asked me about what I've observed coming in from the outside, is that whether you're aware of it or not, you've got this little mini Kenshusei program going on that you haven't actually structured formally, but you do have these young up-and-coming instructors who you're guiding and you're mentoring and encouraging to find their voice, to find the confidence, articulate what their personal style of teaching happens to be, and it's evolving over time. And whether you're doing it consciously or not, that layer adds another big layer to what you already have, which is in the dojo something of really true, genuine, unique value. So the classes themselves, the training itself is very special. It's unique. It's led mostly by you, but then of course the younger generation is coming up through the ranks, and that's what we said at this seminar this past weekend. That was so rich and textured, you might say, and then you've got that formalized / non-formalized training that you guys are getting as young up and coming instructors, which is fantastic. Richard, my husband, had a similar training, a Kenshusei training in New York City from 2011 right through to about 2019, right before COVID. And now we don't have such a formalized system. We had someone coming, whether it's Sweden, whether it's Iceland, or from all around the world, and they'd spend a month with us at the dojo.
I was wondering about
and then
this.
That was shadowing Richard the whole time. We were doing all his classes plus all his privates and all his other commitments, with the exception of him going to travel to teach overseas to seminars, which he did monthly. And then the rest of the time was them taking over the class schedule.
Can I ask, why did you, in 2019, why did you drop the outwardly formal
because we lost our space. We lost our dojo, which was perfectly set up for a Kenshusei staying in the dojo and living almost in a traditional way, which is how, if you imagine in Japan, how Richard went through that in the early 1990s. And he was there for 10 years, and so he knows how it was to go through that very difficult time of being in a tiny little Tokyo Kenshusei boarding situation, and then teaching every day, following your sensei, the master level teachers, who some of whom are not alive today, and so you're carrying on the lineage, you're carrying on the tradition, and it was a very unique experience. Of course, we can't replicate that. We tried to do it, and I think we did a great program from 2011 to 2019. But what I'm saying here is that we try to do something similar. We've just started to mentor some aspiring instructors in New York City, but I see. What I'm saying now is that I see that
I actually had
that informal
formal teacher training program, and it was on the website, and the minimum requirements to sign up, what is expected of you, and what the purpose of it, and what the significance of teacher training is. And it didn't work, and it wasn't because I didn't have a permanent setup. I think people get into this. Maybe you can call it an institutional way of thinking. So suddenly you got a structure, and immediately the mind tightens or closes to this notion of something, and that can work in some cases. But I think but there's too many. What's the word for it? Presumptions. You've decided what it is because it's a teacher training program. Rather than the simplest things, do the classes, look at what it requires. If you can do more, even better. Do the seminars, arrive early, leave last, do your chores, walk around, clean up, take care, lay the mats, look after the juniors, take the ukemis, because that's the bit where the ones on teacher training are getting more direct access to the teacher, and so they should. But as soon as you got this rigid notion of it, it sort of kills it. There's a sort of a weird paradox, and I've seen it in so-called more successful ways of doing it that some people have tried. I don't see it as successful. I think informal is better. So in a way, by dropping it, people started coming towards me with half a foot in that way, and then I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? So that's a question for me, and this is what I do with it. It's quite organic. It's not contrived, but we've got a few guidelines to help us. Well, number one is Aikido itself, and number two is which is a lot of martial arts. I'll speak for Aikido. It's a vehicle, and what does that vehicle carry with it? And I suppose I've carried a fair bit of that myself over the years. I went for a formal training program. It was unique. It's gone. I mean, you mentioned Richard, your husband. That is gone. That will never happen again. The teachers who can do that, the students who would accept that kind of very stringent requirement is gone, and maybe it's the best that it's gone. Actually, that things have got to move on, and it has to be worked out in a different way now. Is there something sadly lost? Yeah, I believe that as well. But there's also something gained as long as we hold the standard in the way that we can. But there is, I think. I've had kids who've come over before we moved to archery, in fact, where the parent is coming to class and telling me, with young James, not our new James, a different James, and he's like, he's in the bedroom and he's folding his pajamas and he's tidying up. I never taught him to do his pajamas. I never taught him to do all that. Suddenly, within this, an Aikido can look so much more free-flowing than a lot of sort of kata-based stuff, but it's not. It's quite stringent in itself. And he, as a kid, he must just have picked that up. And his mum's words, it was a slob. The next moment, he's doing his homework on time, he's folding everything, and he's like, I've never seen anything like it. So it's affected him somehow. And you can't plan that.
No. It's interesting, even because now we've got 2 children's classes happening a week, and there's quite
growing.
Yeah, a kind of growing children's program, I guess, and it was interesting. It's interesting to observe the kids on a Wednesday. Well, not only on a Wednesday, but I mentioned the Wednesday children because it's the class with the most new people in it. So there's a Saturday class, but there are kids that have been there for a while training with the adults, and so they kind of they're the models of etiquette and things like that. But it's really interesting to see how the new children pick up on things that we haven't necessarily verbalized, and they just start to carry themselves in a certain way. And of course, there are times we have to tell them things like, don't walk around with your sandals on and whatnot. But generally, there's a feeling that I think children are really receptive, and they absorb that stuff.
Plus the natural leaders. Have you
noticed
a couple?
They come forward. They
start to, and suddenly you see 4 or 5 gravitate around them, and it's you can't make this stuff up. You can't write. You can't have a program. It's all programs and structures are just how to point fingers and guide people. I think in the end. If you're able to, in some way, to pass some of that on through other means, at the moment it looks like it's working, and as long as it's working, we carry on. And if and when it doesn't, you tweak something and change it. But I think that adds to the community part. It does create it. It's not an accident. The Saturdays are suddenly ballooning there, and then. We've got ideas of adding. You're actually the first. We used to have a yoga teacher a long time ago. It didn't quite work. I don't think I was ready for it. Actually, I didn't have enough people. The location I was in wasn't quite right, and I hadn't brought people forward enough that you can start to broaden into other areas, because other areas brings the freshness. You bring freshness. So we work at trying to refresh ourselves, but when something genuinely fresh comes by, that changes it. And also, it gives the rank and file members a sense of something that is just bigger than just this. So that's a broadening of community. I I would say. So there's stuff going on. Till the next time.
Yes.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of giving us like your secrets in a way that you're not.
Am I?
A little bit, the biggest. Or I think it's in a way I look up to you because you've done this for decades and you've built that intuition that you said, like to look at people. And sometimes as you look up to your teachers, you think that they have everything figured out. But rather than having everything figured out and established criteria and all that, it's just this paying attention to your own intuition and see where it takes you a little bit. That's
You
super
mean
interesting.
I'm just making it up as I'm going along?
No, but you're also a teacher. Like you were a teacher in a school, like in the most one of the most traditional ways of being a teacher, and you also, I feel, because you've been leading the children's class as well, you also added a lot of that experience, like that eye. That I'm going to call it clinical eye because that's the easiest association. Like when a doctor looks at a patient and they say, oh, here, and that's what I see, that you've been developing this skill over time.
I abandoned planning things years and years ago. I can't remember, in fact, when I did that. There's various reasons, but partly how I work things and process things, partly the reality of training. If I start with the reality of training, you can plan whatever you like, and then especially in the early days, no one turns up. You got one or two people there. Okay, suddenly, oh my God, we've got 3 left-handed people who think they've only got left feet and left arms, and so we've got to go way back to fundamentals here, absolute fundamentals. Then you've got to mix, and then you turn up again, and you've got a crew that's so pumped up. Collectively they're on their own trajectory. So I have a choice to make. Do I direct that somewhere as almost like a conductor? Leave them alone. Let them run with it. They've created it. Let them go with it. And sometimes that's a car crash, but more often it's brilliant. I enjoy those. It's like I'm an active part in it without being in it. But in the early days, it was a car crash. So don't panic. It's not you. It's your
Which
predecessors.
actually brings me to the great point, which was going to wrap up this particular point, which is Fran's question. And it is about discernment, and you only get that after years and years of making mistakes, like we were talking about. You have so much exposure to different classes and different students, and with all kinds of issues, and some of them fantastic students, some of them everything like in between, and then the lowest of the low. And then you learn over time what to do in order to handle them so that they can get the best experience possible in that moment or in that hour that you have with them. And then years and years of that, then you have this judgment, which is so intuitive and so natural and so second nature that it's just, okay, I'm going to give them this, or I'm going to give them that. Or, okay, I might have planned this, but you know what? Out the window, and we're going to do this and this. And so it does become it's like a intuitive decision on a sense of knowing what's required. And then when you get that, and you probably experience it to a degree already now, that you just sense, okay, look at the bodies, look at the way they're moving, they're tired today, what am I going to give them? And so then you trust your judgment, and I'm sure because you've got a lot of experience teaching music, that similar parallels, within that world, and knowing how to transfer that to the mat. So discernment.
Wow.
I think we've reached like a really nice rounded conversation.
Ending,
yes, to get to wrap up a little bit.
good.
I don't know if you have any other questions.
Covered
to
a lot.
add.
Good, yeah.
But we went through having a guest teaching to people who have never or have not much experience, and what did you observe from our training, and what things you could bring from that observation to your class. Super interesting. To how do we build community? How your experience has shaped the way you face different groups of people.
Sure.
So I think
Yeah,
really, really
thank
nice
you.
conversation.
And I think just that, like, we really enjoyed this weekend, and you know, with the Aikido part and the Karate part, which was very novel for us.
Great.
So yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Maai Perspective, where women talk Budo.